Welcome back to Hardball. 226 House Democrats and 1 Republican have signed on to a resolution to block President Trump's national emergency declaration on the southern border. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said the House will vote on Tuesday on a resolution introduced by Texas Congressman Joaquin Castro to terminate the emergency. The resolution already has enough support to pass the House. Then the Senate has 18 days to take up that legislation. 4 Republicans would have to vote with Democrats for the resolution to pass the Senate. Today, President Trump was asked what would happen, what he would do if that happens.
Will you definitively veto that resolution that was introduced today that would block your national emergency if it passes?
On the wall?
Yes.
Will I veto it? 100%. 100%. And I don't think it survives a veto. We have too many smart people that want border security.
That means you'd end up needing a 2/3 supermajority in both houses to get that in over Trump's veto if it came to that. Visiting the border in Laredo today, Speaker Pelosi responded to that veto threat.
Let me be very clear. The president's attitude is not going to color whether I honor my oath of office to uphold the Constitution of the United States. I wish he would have the same dedication to that oath of office himself. But we will be fighting him on this usurping of power, of violating the Constitution of the United States in the Congress, in the courts, and with the American people. So this is a path I would not recommend he go down.
And I'm joined now by Danielle Moody Mills, radio host for Sirius XM, and Nan Hayworth. She's a former Republican member of Congress from New York. Danielle, let me start with you. So there's sort of 2 tracks here in terms of Democrats trying to get this declaration revoked. We got the court filing there in the 9th District, a bunch of state attorneys general trying to get the courts to cut this thing off. Looks like that may end up heading to the Supreme Court at some point. Now you've got this resolution going through Congress. We just talked about the hurdles it's got there. Realistically, for Democrats who want to stop this thing, are the courts the better bet here?
Yeah, I mean, the courts are going to be the better bet because I think what's important that the Democrats are doing right now is putting this resolution out there, is forcing people to go on the record and say that they don't want this wall. I know that the purpose of the entire resolution is to get the Senate to vote on it, is to get Republicans on the record, and I think that it's important. But to end this battle, this wall, this fake emergency that Trump has created, it's going to have to end in the courts. And 16 states have filed lawsuits. The ACLU has filed a lawsuit, so it's headed there. Well,
so Nan, from the objection you hear from some conservative voices, at least that I've heard, is the precedent. Okay, if Trump gets to declare an emergency and move money around, we Republicans may like that now, but wait till a Democratic president comes in and decides the Green New Deal is a national emergency, something like that. With that in mind, do you anticipate there actually will be some Republicans voting with the Democrats on this?
It's a great question, Steve. I think very few. I think Senator Collins has expressed that she might vote for that kind of a resolution. But essentially, it's Congress's job, Steve. You know, the National Emergencies Act can be modified. As it stands now, the National Emergencies Act allows the president wide latitude on defining what's an emergency. In fact, it's basically the president's call. If the president were not to declare this an emergency, and I think there are plenty of facts in his favor. We had over 250,000 incarcerations in 2017 and 2018 of illegal immigrants who had committed serious crimes, including murder. We do have drugs pouring over the border. We do have upwards of 50,000 people attempting to cross the southern border every month. It is a very important situation. But even if the president didn't do this, that would not prevent a Democratic president in the future from declaring any of the national emergencies you just mentioned.
So it sounds like you're saying they'll probably stick with him. So then that creates this situation here. Look, if this resolution ultimately can't get through Congress over Trump's veto, if you don't get a 2/3 supermajority, that would require a bunch of Republicans defecting. And then on the legal front, works its way through the courts and it gets up to that, the Supreme Court level, and you've got a conservative majority there. If it doesn't work on either one of those tracks, where's that going to leave us?
I mean, it leaves it with the people, right? The people, 60% of Americans have said that this is not an emergency. People that live at the border have said this is not an emergency. I've had people call in from El Paso, from different areas, onto my show that are like, where is the emergency? We know that areas are safer that have had that have an influx of undocumented people. We know that that statistically, first of all, Pew Research has shown us that in 2016 is the lowest number of immigrants that have been in the country, and it has been declining over time. The president himself said at the press conference, I don't need to do this. So there are so many areas in which, when it goes to the courts, if you're actually looking at the facts do not align with Trump's desire. And this wall is really about his ego and cashing in on a campaign promise. It's not about an actual emergency. Because if we were going to talk about a national emergency, we would talk about gun violence. We would talk about the rise in hate crimes.
But now you're getting into that's the warning you hear there from conservative. A Democratic president declares one of those.
Right. Steve, it's up to Congress to modify the National Emergencies Act. And
yeah,
with all due respect, which of course they should do. That is Congress's job. But in terms of the severity of the situation, listen to the Customs and Border Patrol, including President Obama's former chief of CBP, who said, yes, we definitely have a serious situation here. We've had a rise in attempted entries in 2017 and 2018. A lot of that may relate to the economy, in fact, because, of course, the economy is booming. People want to come here.
Let me ask you from this standpoint, then, from the standpoint of a Trump voter who feels what you're expressing right now, heard him in the campaign say the wall, wanted the wall. Okay, for 2 years, Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House, no wall.
Right.
Democrats get control of Congress, then you get a government shutdown, and he comes out. It's like that. What was that Seinfeld episode? Remember when they held out for less? Costanza held out for less. Trump seemed to hold out for less on this. If you're a Republican voter who feels what you just feel, are you disappointed by what he's done here?
Well, the disappointment lies primarily with the way in which the Senate in particular held on to the filibuster on passing legislation. And that meant, because they needed 60 votes to pass legislation on immigration, and as has been the case for decades now, Congress could not come, even with nominal Republican majorities. We didn't have a governing majority in the Senate, so no, they did not get it done. And that is to be regretted, although that isn't the president's fault. The president is now trying to act and protect the country. The situation has become acute. We have a lot of drugs flowing into the country. They do flow across the southern border. There are drugs that are getting past ports of entry. We know that apprehensions occur at the ports of entry. But this is a serious situation. 250,000, more than 250,000 incarcerations 2017 and 2018, and for serious crimes.
It's a serious situation that Trump has created is the separation of families at the border. A serious situation that has happened.
Created, Danielle. That's something that was going on.
He did create it,
That's
and he's exasperated the situation. So the crisis really right now is about giving the U.S. Border Patrol more aid, so that when people are actually crossing and they're going into these detention centers, these jails, that they're actually getting the people are actually getting the care that they need and not dying in our custody.
It seems to me the most likely outcome of this, of course, is if legislatively, ultimately, this is going to sort of be gridlock. If the courts, if it's going to land in a conservative court that upholds it, it's going to be a political question again for the 2020 election. And these are the arguments. These are the arguments we will be having for the 2020 campaign. Danielle Moody Mills, former Congresswoman Nan Hayward. Thank you both for joining.